Hey guys, I hope you guys have been doing well. I don't expect too many people to watch this video because I do know that it's different from my normal content style, but I did find myself with a little bit of time in between working on my All Exotic Destiny 1 video, which I promise is coming out very, very soon. And during that time, I kind of just really found myself really missing strikes, missing the exotic chase, as you guys already know that part, but really missing strikes. And just reflecting on kind of how we got to this point where strikes are just unfortunately dead. And so I do want to talk about the rise and fall of strikes. I put this in PowerPoint format, just kind of like I did with the Nothing Matters video earlier. This is just a way that I used to present information and presentations when it came to my demos when I was a software developer, and it just feels right doing it with this as well. So I hope you guys do enjoy. Let's have some civil conversations in the comments. I'm going to be leaned back in my chair this entire time, so this isn't meant to be taken too seriously. So let's just have a stroll down memory lane and let's just talk about it. So the rise and fall of strikes, forsaking a fundamental part of what made Destiny Destiny. And so with that being said, I have a timeline here. We're not going to go through the lower levels of this, but I do just want to talk about the high level bullet points of how did we get here. So we started off in Vanilla D1, obviously moving on to Taken King, to the Rise of Iron, to Vanilla D2 through Forsaken, to Shadowkeep, to Season of the Worthy, to Beyond Light, to the inevitable demise of Strikes, and Edge of Fate, where you can see in red the death of Strikes. And so let's go ahead and let's figure out how we got to that point. So with that being said, we got to start off at the beginning in 2014 in Vanilla D1 with laying the foundation. So I think a lot of you guys know that I'm a Destiny 1 purist, but rose tinted glasses off. Like I don't want to, come at this from like a blindness from nostalgia. I'll be the first to admit that things were definitely not perfect. And there was a lot of things wrong with Destiny 1, right? Including strikes. But the one thing that I'll say, and the reason why I give strikes a lot of grace in vanilla Destiny 1, is because there was still just that figuring out process of what Destiny even was. There was a lot of mystery in the world because it's not like we're on year 11 like we are now, where we just know every single atom of what Destiny is. Like we had no clue what Destiny was. So there was this explorative side, there was this figuring out side, there was this just realizing what in the world Destiny even was, right? And so I think that lended itself to why something like the Nexus Mind was so enjoyable. It's not that it was just so generationally great, but there was a lot of exploring and figuring out what Destiny even was at the time. With that being said, there was no strike-specific loot. I think a lot of people thought that just was something that existed throughout Destiny's life cycle, but that's not true. We did get that later, but we did not get that with the release of Destiny 1. But there were two things that I want to talk about that I did really like about strikes when it came to vanilla. The first being the additional layers of difficulty as well as the chase. And so I want to talk about that real quick because I'm sure a lot of you guys didn't even realize there were other versions of strikes in vanilla. And unless you're an OG, the word Tiger Strike is probably not something that rings a bell. But believe it or not, there was strikes that were called Tiger Strikes, and it was a way of farming for exotics back in the day. So let's take a quick look at that real quick. And so there you go, the patience and time. And this was back in November of 2014. So exotics were an integral part of chase when it came to Destiny 1 and vanilla, and honestly all of Destiny 1's life cycle, very much unlike Destiny 2, or at least the state that Destiny 2 is in now. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked on my love for exotic chase. But with that being said, strikes offered a way of being able to grind for exotics, and there was additional layers of difficulty where you could at least kind of test yourself and do strikes that had a little bit more difficulty than just kind of running through brainlessly, right? And so there was that side of it, and then the other side was the Nightfall's difficulty / chase as well. So the thing that I loved about Nightfalls back in the day is just how brutal they were, right? And if you failed, you went back to orbit. I mean, if you guys don't remember vanilla Destiny 1 Nightfalls, they were absolutely brutal. We were nowhere near as strong as we are now. The enemies were all brutally mean, and if your fire team died, it was back to orbit. But it was a way of also grinding for really good loot at the time. So let's go ahead and watch this. This is from very early 2015. But yeah, if you were an OG, you remember those original Nightfalls and how pain they were. Good old Galley. Good old Galley. And so, well, I think there was a lot of things that Vanilla Destiny 1 didn't get necessarily right. I think that for laying the foundation of strikes, they were on the right track. We had different layers of difficulty. We had good chase. We still were missing specific chase, but I think this was a good stab of it in the beginning of 2014. Moving on, we have Taken King, and this is where I like to call it where the magic was born. And so this is where we got strike specific loot. So if you're an OG, every single one of these pictures should hold some meaning. Like it should hold some meaning. And so the thing that I loved about the Taken King era was that there was reason to go into each individual strike. There was a reason to go in and get Grasp from Omnigul. There was a reason to go get a Manga Loop. There was a reason to get Treads Upon Stars and Stolen Will and the Darkblade Spite and Baron's Ambition. You know, these were all in individual strikes that you had to target farm. And then I also loved that they added the concept of wearing what you fight. You go ahead and kill Taniks and the Shadow Thief, you get his cloak. You go ahead and fight the Scion Flares and kill Arc last, you get the Scion Flares cloak. You get the Mauler arms from the Bond brothers, or the Devouring Maw Warlock helmet when it comes to the Fallen Saber, Alakul's helmet when you beat him in Sunless Cell, right? And you know, all this different stuff, like, man, like the concept, like what a concept, right? Too, because like it's like almost like they got it right on accident. But the concept of, yes, you can go ahead and farm higher level strikes and nightfalls for exotics and all this different stuff, but how about we give people a reason to go into individual strikes and grind those for certain things? Like, what a cool concept. And so that's the strike specific loot side. On top of that, there was the introduction of 3 of Coins. If any of you guys remember, that was a way to kind of it helped with grinding for exotics, and I remember when that first got introduced, I mean, it made the strike playlist go absolutely bananas, right? Because what you had is people were grinding strikes for strange coins. I don't know if anybody remembers this is when I remember I was in college, and sometimes I would just grind strikes all day endlessly. I could sit and play strikes for 8 hours, which is just insane. Thinking about that now, that just couldn't exist. But you would grind for Zur with strikes by getting your weekly strange coins. Then you'd use those strange coins to get 3 of Coins from Zur, and then you'd use those 3 of Coins in strikes, and then you'd repeat. And so you had this really good loop of grinding for like strike specific loot, while at the same time grinding for coins that then you would turn into Zur to get 3 of Coins. Then you take those into the strikes, you get more exotics, and you repeat that process. And it also helped that they came out with some absolute banger of strikes with Alakul and the Bond brothers as well. And then there was one other thing that kind of slips under the radar as well, and that was that they made strikes evolve with the world variants. And so you might be wondering what in the world that means, but what it meant was that there was a playlist where some of these strikes now had taken versions, right? And when I'm looking at Stolen Will, that's one where the Archon Priest, if you guys remember, there was a taken version. And so it was really cool that it made it feel like the world was evolving, right? Because what it made it feel like would be like the equivalent of, let's just use for now the we can use either the Scorn or the Dread, but let's just say with either of those, let's just say we had a Dread playlist where now I can go ahead and do the Arms Dealer, but there's Dread everywhere, or I can go ahead and do Lake of Shadows and there's Dread everywhere, right? Or there's Scorn everywhere if it would have been Forsaken, to use that as an example as well. They did this with Taken, and I thought it was so cool. So that was another thing as well. So this is where the magic was born. A lot of magic here, as you guys can hear in the enthusiasm in my voice. Then we move on to the golden age of strikes, which was Rise of Iron. And so not a lot in terms of bullet points here, but what they really just did was improve on every single thing that we had already talked about. So they introduced, if you don't know this on the left, the first item, then you probably weren't here for this time period, but skeleton keys. And so this was a way of extending the grind when it came to strike specific loot, because it allowed you to target even further, because you could grind for skeleton keys. Then you could open up a chest at the end of your strike, and it would guarantee you one of the strike-specific loot pieces from whatever strike you were doing. So you could open it up with a la cool and get the helmet. So it gave you a way of target farming whatever strike you wanted on an additional level, because before it wasn't guaranteed that you were going to get one. Now, if you had a key, you guarantee you're going to get one. So you could stack keys and then keep grinding strikes. On top of that, they continued on with the evolution with variants. They had Siva, I think it was like Siva Crisis strikes or whatever it was called, but you could do Siva strikes. There was a lot of the strikes that normally kind of operated in one way that now had like a splicer layer on top of it. Once again, was really, really cool. And then they had insanely good loot again with things like Devil's Dawn, which I know you guys remember Devil's Dawn. So this was the golden age in my in my opinion. Like everything was just clicking on all cylinders. You had strike specific loot, you had skeleton keys, you had variations of strikes, you had really good difficulty with Nightfalls and Exotic Chase, you had really good loot where it came to weapons like Devil's Dawn or things like Cloak of Taniks or whatever the case may be. It was just, they were clicking on all cylinders. This was the golden age for me. This was by far the golden age. Then let's move on to Destiny 2. We're now in 2017, and we're going to talk about Destiny 2 Vanilla through Forsaken, and we're going to talk about the steps back first, and then we're going to talk about the steps forward after. So starting off with the death of incentive to grind individual strikes. So this was a step back for the core of the game. So there was still strike-specific loot in Destiny 2 on its launch, but it was in a different variation. They actually changed it where instead of it being strike-specific loot on every individual strike that you played, it was on every single Nightfall you played. So technically there was a reason to go into each individual strike, but really only if it was a Nightfall. And there was only one Nightfall per week. So while it did give you a reason to be playing one strike per week, you didn't have that that foundation now where there was a reason to play 10 different strikes at any given point in time. So that was a step back for me. On top of that, we got rid of the death of wearing what you fight. So this was a step back for identity. So while there still was strike specific loot, as I just mentioned through the Nightfalls, they actually got rid of strike specific loot armor pieces. So there was no more Cloak of Taniks, there was no more Darkblade Helm or Hood of Malak or whatever the case may be. They just did away with armor, and it probably went into the Eververse, unfortunately, but that's kind of what it was, right? And then we had the lack of Exotic Chase. This is exclusively to Vanilla because I think there was great Exotic Chase in Forsaken, but I'm gonna be honest, the Exotic Chase in Vanilla Destiny 2 was awful. It was super easy to get all of the exotics. You were getting spammed with them, and there was no Exotic Chase when it came to Vanilla Destiny 2. And that hurts because, like I told you guys in Destiny 1, there was a reason to farm strikes for exotics. That was part of your fueling reason to play strikes was, I need to get in there for strange coins so that I can spend them at Xur, get 3 coins, get the exotics I want. But when you're just spam with the exotics, it's one less reason to be playing strikes. And then the next thing, death of the evolution of strikes with variants. So it's not like there was a with Red War, now there's like the Red Legion in every single one of the strikes. Like there's like a playlist of having them on top of every single strike, like where maybe you're playing the Lake of Shadows, and then it's like, I don't know, like they just all spawn, even though they're Archibald at one point in time. But you know what I'm saying? Like a layer of like of variants on strikes. They just never did this again. They didn't do it with the Scorn, they didn't do it with the Dread, and etc. etc. So this was the death of that. And then the last thing that they did, and this was a Curse of Osiris / Warmind thing, but they did that weird experiment with strikes being part of campaigns. Do you guys remember that? Like Curse of Osiris and Warmind, like I remember Strange Terrain and Will of Thousands, those actually were also campaign missions that also were strikes. It was like a two-parter. They were like, it was the same thing, but it was in like campaign form. They did like this weird experiment where they integrated strikes with a campaign. That kind of moved away from it, but if you're an OG Destiny 2 player, you might remember that time period. But that was a thing that I thought was kind of a step back. Just make the strikes, amazing, and make the campaign missions amazing, and kind of keep them separate. Like I don't mind having a step in a campaign B go do the strike, but having it be the mission was like, just make it the mission or make it the strike. Then let's talk about the steps forward when it came to Destiny 2 Vanilla through Forsaken. Starting off with something that I thought was really good. They were adding a layer that they've heavily moved away from, I'll first off say, but they used to allow us to brace yourself, brace yourself, brace yourself, brace yourself. You're not bracing hard enough, seatbelt on. You could earn cosmetics in game by playing. I know. Like, remember Prestige Leviathan? You could get the Legend of Acre's ornament by playing. Now I think when we played that exotic axe mission, the second it was done, it was telling you to buy the hoodie. Um, but I'm getting a little sidetracked here. But but back then the cosmetics were earnable in the game, which was so cool. So they added this layer of, I'm sure you don't even know what some of these things are that you're looking at, but I mean, tilt fuse you could get from Arms Dealer, impact velocity, the Sparrow you could get from Exodus Crash. You probably don't even know what that ship is. It's the universal wave function that was in Garden World. Trichomatica, I believe is what it was called. Guys, get in the comments. Let me know how to say that thing. But that was the Ghost and Inverted Spire, the Transmat effect that was in Zol, in the Will of Thousands mission. I thought this was super cool. And like I said, to also give some flowers and credit where credit's due, you could also get the white ornament for Legend of Acreus and Prestige Leviathan. The concept of being able to earn cosmetics and strikes was sick. I love that. Like, now, did I want that at the expense of armor being taken away? Of course not, right? Like, I would have loved if, let's say for the Arms Dealer, if we could have worn his helmet or arms pieces or whatever, right? Or if it was like the Pyramidian and the Warlock gets like a Pyramidian bond or something, right? Like, I'm just making it up, but I would have loved that. But the cosmetics being added to Nightfall specific loot, I thought was really cool. Then they did like new Nightfall strike gimmicks. They were like, okay, like if you would have to once again be an OG, but if you remember the old Nightfalls, there was like at one point versions where if you shot oracles, it would like extend time. And there's like all these other different like experiments that they tried when it came to Nightfalls at this time to like extend time or keep the strike going or whatever the case may be, or ways to earn points. They experimented with some things here. They kind of moved away from some of it, but I didn't think it was inherently a bad thing. It was okay. And then lastly, and this is another thing that I think 99% of you guys completely either weren't here for or you forgot about, but the emblem variants. When I bring this up, a lot of people are always like, what are you even talking about? That's why I didn't put it on this slide yet, but because I wanted it to be on the next slide. I didn't want to spoil it, but a lot of people either forgot these existed or just don't know about these in general. But with that being said, this was one of the coolest concepts with strikes, period. So with each of the individual strikes you see here, so Savathun's Song, which was on Titan, the Inverted Spire, Exodus Crash, A Garden World, the Arms Dealer, the Pyramidian, and the Tree of Probabilities, there were different emblems you could earn from playing the game, man. Oh, when I think about like now, like every emblem being like a drop or whatever the case may be, it just hurts my heart a little bit, right? Like there are different variations just from playing the strike, so it gave you reasons to keep playing the strike over and over and over, and I thought this was so sick. And so you can see there was 4 variations for each of these, there's 7 of these, so 28 different emblems to earn. This is a way to get people in strikes. I don't know why we moved away from this. Sorry, I'm getting a little sad, but this was a major step forward. I loved this. This was great. This was really great. Oh, now let's talk about Shadowkeep. Shadowkeep hurts for me. It hurts for me a lot. So the depth of strike-specific loot plus identity. So to start, strike-specific loot, killed. And this really hurt because it was killed, but it wasn't killed at the same time. And what I mean by that is strike-specific loot was very much killed. You couldn't earn specific loot in strikes anymore. But it wasn't like the loot that I would have expected to see in certain strikes just didn't exist anymore. It still existed. It was just in the Eververse store. And that really hurt because like Blood Runner or the Red Hive ship, I think very much should have been in the Scarlet Keep or at a minimum in Pit of Heresy, right? But it just wasn't. These were either Bright Dust or Silver. And the thing that kills me the most, and a lot of you guys probably don't even realize this, but like when I think about like, let's think about Alakul and having the helmet, right? It was so cool to have the Dark Blades helmet, right? Or like Malakan to have his hood, right? Or to have Tanix's cloak, like these really big names. Even though Hashladum didn't necessarily end up having a big name, She very much should have. And I think if there would have been something cool associated to her strike, then that identity would have been there and there would have been a much heavier association with Hashladum to this strike, because this is Crota's daughter. Like, I just feel like this was such a missed opportunity to tie like a really core cool piece to the strike that you're endlessly grinding to get. They just killed it. It is what it is, I guess. And then emblem variants gone, just moved away from that idea. So no reason to grind individual strikes anymore. I mean, I just don't know why they moved away from this. They just were like, no more. And then, like I said in the last bullet point, strike-specific cosmetics clearly just put in the Eververse store. So this was the death of strike-specific loot, and there was never any more identity in strikes after this. Now let's talk about what Shadowkeep did implement, and it wasn't good. They implemented strike unspecific loot. So funny enough, no one uses this term, but it's a term that I use. And so let me just give the example real quick. So what you're going to see here below is a Xeno class shotgun and a royal entry. These were loot pieces that could be earned in any strike. So whether you're doing Glassway, whether you're doing Arms Dealer, whether you're doing Lake of Shadows, whether you're doing Exodus Crash, or whatever the case, you could get these from anywhere. So this is the issue. If I see Ricky Bobby 624 get a Xenoclast or a Royal Entry, I have no idea what strike he got it from. Versus if I see you and you have Cloak of Taniks on, I'm like, you were in Shadow Thief. Or, you know, if I see you with, or even to move on to D2, right? If I see you with like Horror's Least at the time, I knew you were doing the Corrupted, right? At the time, at least. Now I know it's been thrown into GM loot, but like, well, now GMs aren't even there, but we're gonna get there. But with that being said, you could look and see what somebody had and be like, I know where you were. Or if you didn't, you're like, well, where in the world did you get that? And you're like, oh, you got to go grind the cool strike if you want that helmet, right? With these, it's just like, oh, just play any strike, you know? So you just kind of jump in the playlist and you just grind and then it just drops. Then you kind of move on with your life. And that kind of sucks. But if I see Ricky Bobby get any of these, I know exactly what strike he got it from. I know he was in Sepix Perfected or in Shadow Thief or in Omnigul or in the a la Cool Strike or the Dust Palace, right, with the 3 different Silent Flares. And just, can we take one more moment just to remember how cool it was that depending on what boss you killed last was the cloak that you were able to get? Just what a concept. It's just like, sometimes this stuff is so good that I just wonder if Bungie got it right by accident. Only because it's just so good. Like, I just don't know how we could have moved away from all of this. It's too good to move away from consciously. So it almost makes me wonder if like it was like unconsciously. Now let's talk about Season of the Worthy. Steps forward for challenge and steps back for identity. So the first thing that I want to let it be known, I don't like Grandmasters, but it's probably not for the reason you think. And I have a lot of respect for Grandmasters, and I love what Grandmasters did. I just don't like them personally. The only reason why is because I feel like all of that identity talk that I was just talking about, all of that, you know, wearing what we fight, all of that specific loot and grinding individual strikes, I think Bungie thinks they solved that with Grandmasters, or I think they thought that at least at the time. But the same issue remained for me with Grandmasters. Like, if it came to the Slammer Sword or Pally or the Swarm, I don't know what Grandmaster you ran. I just knew you ran Grandmasters. There was no need, like, hey, you gotta go do you got to do whatever strike, right? You got to go do the Scarlet Keep. You got to go do, like I said, like it could be the Warden of Nothing. It could be whatever the case may be, right? There was just none of that. It was just, oh, just go play Grandmasters. So the identity was gone. But let's talk about what they did get right, because like I said, I respect Grandmasters for a lot of ways, and I have a big, sad, like soft spot in my heart for all the creators that really had a lot of their content around GMs, and now it kind of just like don't. Like, that sucks. And it was a very similar feeling for me when all of my content used to just be like helping with like Whisper and Outbreak, and then those just didn't exist anymore after Beyond Light. So it does suck when like something that you're so like, you know, like you love so much just disappears, right? It sucks. So I really have a soft spot for that. But let's talk about the steps forward. So excitedness to log on a week-to-week basis. I remember there's so many weeks where people are like, oh, it's going to be XYZ Adept, I'm on it. You know, it's Pally week, I'm on. Like, you know, like whatever the case may be, it's the Slammer week, I'm on. You know, like that's cool. I did like that people were excited to get on a week-to-week basis, not just for the story, right? Like, I think having other layers of why you want to play the game is important. I think this was one of them. I think the challenges were great. There was a lot of just like, challenge that was either like solo challenge, or, people doing all these other different types of things with GMs, GM speeds. Like there's a lot of different challenges with GMs that I really like enjoyed seeing people enjoy. Like, it made me happy to see, and that layer being gone kind of sucks. On top of the titles and gilding, I know there's so many people that loved, gilding their conqueror, getting their conqueror the second that it comes out, and blah blah blah, right? Not having that sucks as well. I know that you can still technically gild it and blah blah blah, but you know what I mean, right? You know what I mean. The next thing is the replayability. So there was this really good loop. Once again, I can very much say, even though there was things that I didn't like about Grandmasters, the things that I very much respected was that loop they created, where you could build, craft, and get whatever roles you were after, or whatever you were grinding for, and then after that, then you would test those said builds in Grandmasters. And I'll move my camera here for just a quick second, and then you get your loot and your rewards, which would be those adepts, and then you'd repeat, and you just keep slotting new things in your build, then testing those build in Grandmasters, then getting good loot, then slotting more loot in your build, and you had this really, really good loop going, right? And I respect Grandmasters for that. And then lastly, the loot was extremely good. There was no identity to it, and that's my biggest fault to the loot for Grandmasters. But in terms of like the loot, I mean, people were really excited about those adepts, so I respect it. Like there was a lot of steps forward for challenge. I just think there were steps back for identity, and I hope you guys can understand that. With that being said, let's talk about content vaulting and beyond. So we're going to be talking about beyond content vaulting as well, starting with, and you can see in the parentheses, light, beyond light. So let's talk about content vaulting. So this meant a lot of strikes went, bye-bye, unfortunately. Tree of Probabilities, The Garden World, Savathun's Song, Will 1000, Strange Terrain, The Pyramidian, and there's a few others, but like, that we'll get into in a little bit, but which you'll see in the next bullet point. But I want to test you guys first. There was one more strike that got removed, and it was the shortest lived strike in Destiny history at the time. I'll give you a quick second to pause. All right, hopefully you're back. The Festering Core they introduced in Shadowkeep, and then they just yeeted it to the Shadow Realm. Just gone. I like the Festering Core. They just yeeted it to the Shadow Realm. It's just gone. All right. I was like, okay, well, okay, I guess like sure. And then, so funny enough, or not funny enough, but funny enough, when Witch Queen launched, Hollowed Lair and Broodhold were also removed. They removed a lot of the Tangled Shore stuff, and that was when like the Forsaken campaign left, and all that good stuff. But yeah, we lost two more strikes, the Hollowed Lair and the Broodhold, which the Broodhold only had a short-lived period of even being like not just a PS4 exclusive. Like luckily at the time I was still a PS4 user until Beyond Light, so I played a good amount of the Broodhold, but there's some people that never got to play the strike. All right, next let's talk about the death of Exotic Chase. So starting off, what happened to weapon exotic random drops? So one more little bit of trivia here, but we actually had our last random drop exotic weapon world drop, so not like raid and dungeon stuff, but in Shadowkeep, and that was the last time we ever got a random drop exotic weapon. Do you know what it was? You can hit pause again. I'll give you a few seconds. It was the Monte Carlo. So believe it or not, the Monte Carlo was a random drop in Shadowkeep, and then they just went away from this. And Monte Carlo now you can get in the timeline, so it's technically not even just random drop anymore. You can get it in 5 minutes, which sucks. But that was the last time they did random world drop exotic weapons. So no reason to be in strikes to maybe randomly get one to drop or whatever the case may be. It's just, or like farming engrams for exotic weapons. That just wasn't a thing anymore. Just exotic weapons now are just either in the Monument to Lost Light or in the season pass. Pretty much that's pretty much it. And then what happened to armor exotic random drops? So we were already on the decline on Shadowkeep, where they started off like slowly pushing towards this, where 3 of the exotic armor pieces like Phoenix Cradle, Storm Bracers, and Assassin's Cowl were all campaign exotics. And then there were some subsequent Shadowkeep armor exotics that were random drop. But then when we got to Beyond Light, they all were in Lost Sectors, right? So completely moved away from anything strike related. Completely. The one thing I will say, and I guess this, I put it in green, it's technically a good thing, but like I didn't really love it, but it was what it was. And I think it did at least give some reason, was there was an introduction of running strikes for pinnacles that eventually became access to 9 exotic engrams a week. Farming specific strikes was long dead at this point, obviously, but it did give people at least a little bit of a reason to run strikes for your power grind and for exotics. But, you know, that was pretty much it, but it did give something. So yay, I guess, right? Yay. Um, and then lastly, we have strikes being introduced at a massively slower pace from this point on. So let's talk about it. So in Beyond Light, we actually technically got 3 strikes, but I don't really call it 3. We got 1 main strike, and believe it or not, this is when they introduced the 2 Earth strikes. This is when we got Omnigul back, or Navoda, I should say. And this is when we got Sepix back. And then in Witch Queen, you know, a lot of people I know enjoy Witch Queen and Witch Queen. Then we had 2. And that's when we had Birthplace and we had Lightblade. And then we had Lightfall. And then we only got 1 strike, and you see where this trend is going. And then Final Shape, we had 1 launch strike, and I put in all caps launch strike because I know some people are going to get in the comments and run and say, "Oh, yo, Stremmer, Sunless Cell came back," and it did for an episode and it's gone, unfortunately. And you know, B, that wasn't at launch. Like at least the Earth strikes were at launch, but this was towards the tail end of Final Shape, and then it was gone. It's actually lived even shorter than Festering Core, ironically. But with that being said, keep in mind, and I know that Curse of Osiris is by no means Final Shape, but Curse of Osiris didn't introduce 2 strikes. In Final Shape, we got 1. That's just some food for thought. And then, as you can see, here we are in Edge of Fate, where we have good old 0 strikes. And it's just crazy how we got here. Like, it's crazy how we got here. And then one more thing that happened in Witch Queen that I hate. I'll just be honest. The Vanguard Op playlist adding Battlegrounds. This I just did not love. I know Battlegrounds, some people love the challenge. And I think that for Grandmasters, there's some Battlegrounds that provide good challenge, and it has its use cases. I won't argue it. But there is no identity with Battlegrounds. You can't, like, if there was a gun to any of our heads and we had to name a boss of a Battleground, you'd never be able to remember. It's just like, it's just they were what they were. I think that they were good for GMs. I don't think they were good for the Vanguard Ops playlist. And I did not like when Bungie started blurring the line between thinking that Battlegrounds could like fill the role that Strikes had. I just don't believe that's a thing. But yeah, they added Battlegrounds to the Vanguard Ops playlist, and I at this point could never load up a strike. It felt like when I would be in the Vanguard Ops playlist, I was leaving like 5 or 6 times to get like 1 strike. It felt like sometimes, which I hate it. And then here we are at the end, the death of Strikes, the demise of Strikes, Edge of Fate. We have no reason to run 99% of the game with the portal, which is just the heartbreaking truth. And the thing is I know there's a lot of things to do in the portal, but this has always been a thing since the beginning. So I don't want people to think this is an Edge of Fate specific problem, but like people are always going to run the fastest thing that gets them the most experience and that pushes them the furthest. That's why people were Forge AFK farming, remember? And all these different like things people are the moon bounties, as brainless as that was back in the day, right? For the artifact. People are gonna run what is the fastest. And so the thing is if you don't find other ways to incentivize people to be in certain areas of the game, it's doomed to fail. Because people are only going to run the 1% thing that's getting them the best stuff the fastest. That's why people weren't even playing the raid at first or any of this stuff, right? The raid came out and it was good and nobody was playing it. Sorry. Grandmasters were killed obviously as well. I know there's conquest, but like I said, I feel so much for some of my friends that really centered a lot of their stuff around GMs, and now it's like it just feels like it's like, well, what now? Like, and I know like everybody's pivoting well and everybody's going to be great and, you know, do great, but like, man, does it suck. Like, I know how much people love Grandmasters, so seeing those be removed, it's like, feels a little almost like tone deaf from Bungie, not realizing how much of a core thing that was for a lot of people. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't like them, right? I just wish they would give me identity back to Strikes. Like, that's what I want, but you know, I've kind of given up on that. And then What happens if you queue up a strike not in the portals? This is funny, guys. The other day, I was streaming just for like a little bit. I was just catching everybody up on the progress on the video for D1. And normally, what I do is I just go into the Vanguard Ops playlist and I'll just run strikes and talk to chat. That's just what I do. I love just running strikes. That's what I want to do. And I couldn't match anybody. I sat there for about 30 minutes and then, or not 30 minutes, sorry, that's an exaggeration, but I sat there for probably like 10 minutes. And they were like, yeah, you have to run the strike in the portal, or else nobody's going to matchmake with you. I'm like, there's not anybody else in the world using the Vanguard Out playlist right now. They're like, no. So then I go into the portal and I try to load up a strike, and then I'm like, still not matchmaking because I forgot I need to set it up right so that then people will matchmake with me. And it was just too many layers. So then you know what I did? I just sat in the tower and just talked. And that sucked. That really, really sucked. So one more thing to wrap this up, because I know this video has gotten kind of long. Recommendations besides obviously moving away from the portal, and I'm gonna obviously I have a million recommendations, but like this is the only recommendation I want to give is just based on from the topic of strikes and everything that we've talked about from this point with strikes. And one thing that I think they could do is like going back to that strike specific loot conversation that we were having. The cool thing is yes, there was a lot of amazing loot and raids and trials and whatever else, but there was also either from a cosmetic perspective or a performance perspective, things that were exclusively in individual strikes that got you playing those individual strikes, regardless of there being really good stuff elsewhere. I think the portal needs something like that where, you know, if people want to run Caldera or whatever a trillion times or whatever else for the best power or tier 5s, fine. But you need to, they gotta, and I know this isn't going to happen as copium, but they got to take stuff out of the Eververse store. They got to take different cosmetics like they used to, like the things like Tilt Fuse and the Ghost and Transmat effects, and they got to sprinkle these into different areas of the portal. They need to go back to specific armor, like not just have it just be things you can earn in the Eververse, like have like for like, what do we just have? The DFA boss just came back, right? Like have like something that's specific to him in somewhere. Like, I don't know, I'm just making up, but like that, and that's not even the best example, but I would just say just in general, just some sort of armor that resonates. Like start sprinkling that around. It could be glows. It could be whatever. It could be emblem variants again. It could be transmat effects. Just sprinkle them everywhere. Make the portal Eververse, but free Eververse, where it's like, oh, I can get this really sick thing from here. I can get this really sick thing from here. Because there's only two things that gets people playing these days. It's either you getting the best stuff or looking the best. And most people are going to get the best stuff the fastest way. So if you're not going to be able to solve that with the portal, which I just don't think they're going to be able to, at least not in a timely manner, they need to turn it into free Eververse, basically. People love looking good, and I've seen what some of you guys will go through for some of your emblems. So let's get those emblems sprinkled out into the game and variants and all this different stuff. And maybe animated emblems like Destiny Rising, who knows, but that might be jumping the gun. But regardless, I think this could be a step in the right direction. I think there's two ways to get people to play. I think it's from a performance perspective and it's from a cosmetic perspective. And if we're struggling on the performance, here's a step in the right direction. I think it worked for strike-specific loot and gave us reason to still be grinding Will of Thousands, even though it from a performance perspective, everybody was just using Midnight Coup, EP Shotgun, and Sins of the Past. Yet I still wanted that transmat effect. So that's my 2 cents. I'm talking too much. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. That's my TED Talk. Thanks for coming to it. I'm back to working on the Destiny 1 video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully that's out within the next like month-ish. It's about 7 hours, but I'm just putting my heart and soul into it because I really wanted to capture everything magic-wise that Destiny 1 has to it.